Ryan Nobles is a correspondent with CNN. Did you see that play last night, Ryan?
Which one?
This was the Austin Jackson Boston Red Sox Cleveland Indians game.
Oh, and he caught the ball and fell into the...
Yeah.
Now, I just saw the clip. I think that's a home run, right? Because he caught it and then fell into the home run thing. The ball carried into... He didn't catch it till he was in the home run territory, right?
No, I think he caught it. I think he caught it in the air. I believe. I believe that that would not be a home run, and it's not a home run until when does it become a home run?
I guess when it touches the ground. You know, Ryan, I think you bring up an interesting point because had he hopped the wall and stood on the other side and caught it, it would be a home run. But he catches it and falls into it. Your point is that should be a home run.
No, and I'll tell you why it isn't, because you ever see one of those where they jump up to the tall fence and they almost reach over and grab the ball? Mm-hmm. Well, that's not a home run. That's
but if you land, but my point is if you land back in fair territory, then I would argue that is not a home run. But if you land in the area that would be a home run, you've carried the ball into the area that would count as a home run. So even though you caught it, the ball is in, basically an unplayable territory.
Leave it to
But I guess maybe
CNN.
because he took off from fair territory.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Leave it to CNN to take one of this great apple pie moments in American history and just trying to turn it into some anti-Trump controversy. I just can't believe it.
With the Mets playing awful, I need to rain on everyby else's parade, I guess.
I am. It's just awful.
And we have Ryan on, every week to espouse his liberal views on sports. So we.
That's fine.
I'm sorry. It was right there.
Well, where do we begin?
Well, I think we begin. With talking about this situation with the president and what role he played in crafting a memo or a statement that was put out by his son that later had to be revised and essentially was not true. There are varying reports as to how much he was involved in that, but the White House press secretary yesterday said that the president did indeed weigh in on the crafting of this memo, this despite the fact that his lawyer said repeatedly that he had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And I think, what this is raising even more questions on Capitol Hill about exactly what role the president played in this meeting where his son clearly was taking this meeting to get information from Russia about Hillary Clinton, and it just draws more questions about exactly the campaign at large's role in their relationship with Russia. And I think the big thing I found yesterday, and I talked to Lindsey Graham, who's a Republican, I talked to Mark Warner, who's a Democrat and is on the Intelligence Committee, both of them said the same thing, that if you are willing to purposely write something that with the goal of misleading the public, then how do we trust everything else that you have to say on this topic? And so it gets back to a credibility issue with the administration as it relates to this issue.
Well, how many children do you have today, Ryan?
I only have 4 as of today. So.
Okay, you have 4 children. I didn't know if might be another on the way, though, right? Is that true?
There are just 4 children right now.
Okay, just checking. But I want to say that when your child says to you, no, I didn't do this, and then you find out they actually did.
Right, which happens almost every day.
And then, it's going to happen. And then they say, well, but I didn't do this for real. Okay? Okay, you then begin to say, you've just lost credibility, my child. I'm not sure that I'm believing everything you say right now because you lied about this, and then you lied about this, but then you're telling me you didn't lie about this. That's what we're dealing with in this White House. I hate to say it, but brought down to the level of a child, that's what we're dealing with.
And I think that, for all the criticism that people will give about how much the media is paying attention to the Russia investigation, I think I've been pretty consistent with you, as we've talked about this over the past year, that had the White House just allowed the investigation to go through and have not attempted to get in the way of every new development in this situation, and I have long felt that there is a definitive possibility that the president and his administration and the campaign had no interaction or no involvement with Russia to directly try and impact the election, that Russia did it completely on their own, that the administration and the campaign were not willing to accomplish it. But the problem is they keep putting up roadblocks.
Yeah.
And every time they put up another roadblock, it makes it that much more difficult to come to the truth. And if you were a member of this administration, wouldn't you want the committee to come, these various committees and the special prosecutor, to draw some sort of conclusion that exonerates you? Isn't that the best case scenario? And they seem unwilling to want that to happen.
We will never know, but I do wonder what it would have been like had the president and his team, had they come out and just embraced the investigation to get to the bottom of it, saying, we didn't do anything, but the only way everybody's going to believe us is if we have an independent investigation. Let's do it. And, by the way, my son did have a meeting. It included other campaign officials. It didn't turn into anything, and et cetera, et cetera. If they'd admitted to everything that is out there in the beginning, none of it on its own, based on that admission, would have been all that bad.
But the problem is, Ben, Bill, is that every time we think we've learned everything, something new comes up.
Yeah.
Right? Initially it was just that Michael Flynn met with the ambassador and didn't tell anybody. Then it was just, well, that's not that big of a deal. Well, nobody else has. But then we found out, Jeff Sessions met with the Russian ambassador. Well, and then now we find out about this meeting. Well, the meeting was just about adoption. No, it turns out the meeting was about Hillary Clinton, but we didn't take any of the information. Oh, but it was just Donald Jr. Oh, no, wait. Paul Manafort and Kushner. So it's like at every step of the way, they tell us there's no more there. We've uncovered everything that possibly could have been uncovered with Russia. That's what Sarah Huckabee Sanders says at the podium every day. She's just like, I don't know why you guys keep talking about this. There isn't any new information. But yet every day there's a new bombshell story as it relates to this. I at some point, and the one thing that Warner told me yesterday, Warner's the vice chair of the Intelligence Committee, he wants Manafort, Jared Kushner, and Donald Jr. to come before the Intelligence Committee and answer questions from senators. And he told me directly that if they don't do that, he does not see a scenario where the Intelligence Committee gets a complete sign-off from all of its members, meaning Democratic and Republican, on the final report. So, there's way more to this that's going to come out over time. And as much as the president doesn't like it, that's the reality of the situation.
These are self-inflicted. And when, what's her name? Huckabee there, the new spokesperson. I can't keep track of everybody. Spicer too. When she came out, she says the same thing. The only collusion here is the collusion with the media, trying to discredit this president. The only lying here, that's coming from the media and these lying stories. No, this is coming from the president, and that's the part that people can't just let go. And so that brings me to this question. I know CNN is all over this today. And that is, are Republicans, not just Lindsey Graham and John McCain, but are Republicans now beginning to distance themselves from the president?
Well, the best example that's happening right now, and it's way more than both Lindsey Graham and John McCain, is Arizona Senator Jeff Flake. Flake is a libertarian, but he is a rock-hard conservative. His voting record is 100% conservative. And he just wrote a book about the conservative movement, and an excerpt of that book was put out on Politico, where he essentially says that the Republican Party can no longer capitulate to the president, and that for a long time Republicans have tried to convince themselves that having him in the White House would still allow them to move their agenda forward, and that they were going to have to ignore the uncomfortable things about Donald Trump because ultimately they would be able to achieve their goals. But he said he's now gotten to a place where he realizes that bargain was not worth the effort, and that the president is bringing down the conservative movement, set aside the Republican Party, that his actions are making it difficult to move forward a conservative agenda.
Yeah.
So Flake has basically said he's no longer defending the president. Now, Flake's never been a defender of the president. He was never Trumper. He didn't vote for Trump, but he's tried to find ways to work with him.
Yeah.
And he's excused some of the tweets, and he's tried to say, we're just trying to work on the agenda. And what's interesting about Flake is that Flake is up for re-election in 2018, and the president has already vowed to run a primary challenge against him. Wow. And Arizona voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. This was a state that Donald Trump won. Mm-hmm. So if you see someone like him, could this begin to, could this be the front end of Republicans starting to say that we don't want to associate ourselves with the president? But I have to say, as much as you see Flake taking this kind of defiant tone, the vast majority of Republicans are still, giving him the benefit of the doubt. Mm-hmm. It's not like they're retreating from the president en masse at this point. If
there's a movement, it seems like this is the beginning of a potential movement. But I got to say, there's also some danger here, because if you go against this president and he does work to put up a candidate against you in a primary, that's going to be very difficult in a primary, which voters tend to be more conservative and overwhelmingly supporting Donald Trump. In a primary, that could be very dangerous for incumbents, Republican incumbents.
Well, and then, you and I have talked about this before, then it just damages you more in the general election. You end up coming out of that wounded. And so now you've got to try and, you've spent the whole primary kind of tracking to the right, then you've got to get into the general, and you've got to find a way to get back to the middle. It's definitely a difficult proposition. There was a lot of people yesterday, when his article came out, that were criticizing him, saying that this was, designed as an election, that he's basically, that he's taking a bet that the president's approval rating has dropped so much that there's no way you could possibly win a general election and run alongside the president. But, if that's the risk he's taking, that's a risk, that's a political calculation that all Republicans are going to have to take here over the next 2 to 4 years. And, there are new polls out today that show that Democrats have a 7-point generic ballot advantage in some of these congressional races, which doesn't really mean a whole lot, because once you attach a candidate to it, it sometimes changes. But it just shows that the tide continues to track away from the president. But all that being said, Bill, and I know that your listeners think that we're too hard on the president sometimes, I still have to believe there's no reason to think right now that despite a 36% approval rating and despite the fact that he has this cloud of the Russia investigation hanging over him, I still believe that the president is the odds-on favorite to be reelected in 2018, or 2020, I should say, because at this point the Democrats still don't have a unifying figure or a unifying message to answer him. And I was at this event last Monday where the Democrats tried to reboot their message, and they did it way out in Western Virginia, and the coverage of it was terrible. They can't get on the same page. They come off disjointed and rocky. So this idea that just because he's had a tough time, that we should already be writing the epitaph to the Donald Trump presidency, we're not there yet. Right. I mean, we have a long way to go.
Yeah. And, listen, the Democrats complain about Republicans not having a plan for a replacement to Obamacare. They continue to fight. They continue to campaign against the president. But, again, they don't have a clear plan of who is going to be that candidate.
Well, and, healthcare is a perfect example, Bill.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. Republicans totally dropped the ball on this. They should have been ready to go with a plan in place to repeal and replace Obamacare. They didn't do it. They've lost that opportunity. But it's not as if Democrats are waiting in the wings. I mean, regardless of your perception of the Affordable Care Act, it needs help, right?
Yep.
It's got to be fixed. Across the board, Democrats argue that. The President Obama himself argued that before he left office. So it's not as if Democrats are standing there saying, okay, listen, give us the ball and we'll fix all of this.
Right.
They're in the same position that Republicans were.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these guys are all over the map when it comes to health care. They have no idea how to fix the system right now. And I think that's what the American people are crying out for. They want to hear from a politician that has a common sense, unifying message to fix some of these big problems that the country is facing right now, that is absent of a partisan flag. That is just, this is the best idea. If you want to find a way to get the most health care to the most people for the cheapest price, this is the way that you can do it. And at this point, it's still hung up on whether or not you call it Obamacare, and whether or not it fits into this kind of political explanation that makes people feel more comfortable. And until we can break away from that, I don't see some of these big problems being solved.
What are you? Have you heard anything? Finally, last question. Anything on Scaramucci? What really led to this? I mean, craziness.
Well, I have to say, and again, and this goes back to I know the criticism that your listeners sometimes have of our approach to the way we're covering the president. Mm-hmm. This is an example of where I have to say that across the board, Donald Trump is getting high marks for his handling of the situation. Now, the appointment of Scaramucci, you can argue, was probably a bad idea.
Yeah.
But the move he's made to install John Kelly as his chief of staff and what he appears to have done to empower John Kelly to kind of take over the West Wing, both Republicans and Democrats that I talked to said was a good thing. And his first act of business being that he dismissed Anthony Scaramucci unceremoniously and said, this is not how this White House is going to operate anymore. So we talked before about the different factions that exist in the West Wing, and it appears now that, at least in the short term, that the president feels comfortable handing the keys over to John Kelly to say, okay, you're running this shop now, and everyone answers to you. The cabinet members answer to you. All these senior advisors answer to you. So, like, Kellyanne Conway is not going to go to the president but by John Kelly. Either is Steve Bannon.
Even his kids, right, Ryan?
Yeah, they're right.
I mean, that's we don't have an official organizational flow chart right now, but that appears to be that appears to be at least the perception that they want to provide us. And so, and the thing is, everyone thinks that John Kelly is a capable, competent, and successful individual. And it could be the type of person to right the ship.
Yeah.
But as we've said many times before, it doesn't matter who you make chief of staff. The president is still the same guy, and he is a person who thrives under chaos. He likes the infighting within his administration, and I find it hard to believe that even if the organizational flowchart says that you got to go to John Kelly before you go to the president, I have a hard time believing that his daughter can't get the president's ear whenever she wants.
Yeah.
So that's the Javanka wing of the White House is always going to be looming out there.
Yeah.
And, as far as I know, John Kelly hasn't taken away his phone, so he still has access to Twitter.
He can still tweet.
And that's been, a big drag on his administration. So we'll see. I mean, at least we, at this point, need to give him the benefit of the doubt.
All right, interesting stuff. It's interesting more and more by the day. It's just crazy. Ryan Nobles, thank you so much. We'll talk again next week.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Ryan is a correspondent with CNN up on Capitol Hill.